So, because it's 420, it's pretty much the stoner holiday, I figured I would take a little bit of time to talk about what this administration's views on legalization of marijuana is going to be. Um, so, a lot of people are concerned um, that this administration might use the federal government to crack down on states that have already legalized marijuana, or and to just crack down on marijuana in general. Um, and there's been some slightly mixed signals from the administration itself. Trump has come out and said that he basically feels like it's a states' rights issue. But some people in his cabinet have had very different opinions. And one of those people is his Attorney General Jeff Sessions. And this article from the Washington Post sums that up quite nicely. Will Jeff Sessions launch a war on weed? If so, it could accelerate marijuana legalization. Today is April 20th, when reporters and columnists everywhere bust out their lamest pot jokes to note what has become a new quasi-holiday devoted to advocacy for marijuana legalization, and some new polls show just how strong that movement is becoming. A CBS poll out today shows that 61% of Americans favor full legalization, the highest number the poll has recorded, while the Quinnipiac poll puts the number at 60%, with an incredible 94% saying that people ought to be able to get it if their doctors prescribe it. CBS put that figure at 88%. Perhaps more important, 71% in the CBS poll and 73% in the Quinnipiac poll said that the federal government should leave states alone that have legalized it. So it's pretty definitive, according to this, from the American people themselves. The majority of them favor full legalization, but the vast majority say that people should be able to use it medicinally if their doctors prescribe it, and that the feds should leave states alone that have legalized it. People are pretty clear about this, and there have been other polls that have been done, and the support for legalization has been growing pretty rapidly. But Jeff Sessions doesn't seem to really be on board with that. He's taking the more old school point of view, for sure. But there's one person who doesn't agree, and he happens to be the chief law enforcement officer of the U.S. government. In fact, if there's a single thing that Attorney General Jeff Sessions hates more than undocumented immigrants, it might just be marijuana, which is why he appears to be planning what amounts to a return to a 1980s-style war on drugs. So I agree with that second part. This is a Washington Post article. That first part was some, clear, Washington Post bias. They don't like Jeff Sessions very much. I don't think he hates undocumented immigrants, as they put it, aka illegal immigrants, but that's, politically incorrect. When it comes to cannabis, the Attorney General is old school. His views seem to be ripped right from Reefer madness, with dark warnings about how the evil weed will fry your brain like an egg, and who knows, maybe make you start listening to that crazy jazz music. Here's an excerpt of a speech he gave last month. I realize this may be an unfashionable belief in a time of growing tolerance of drug use, but too many lives are at stake to worry about being fashionable. I reject the idea that America will be a better place if marijuana is sold in every corner store, and I am astonished to hear people suggest that we can solve our heroin crisis by legalizing marijuana, so people can trade one life-wrecking dependency for another that's only slightly less awful. Our nation needs to say clearly once again that using drugs will destroy your life. So you have him there equating marijuana to heroin, saying it's only slightly less awful, and of course, he's going by the federal Schedule 1 classification that marijuana is under currently, which is due to the Controlled Substance Act of 1970, and that basically puts it in the same league with heroin. So it's it's definitely going against the grain from the perspective of the American people. And I'd be interested to see what sort of actual data, what sort of statistics and studies he would have to back up, the claim that marijuana is only slightly less harmful than heroin. So definitely, this is a guy who's kind of stuck in this old school, mentality of, just all drugs are bad, basically, and that they all need to be cracked down on. And so it's stuff like that Jeff Sessions says that has people worried. And there's been more recently another Trump official that has come out and sort of mirrored these statements. So this is from NBC. Homeland Secretary Kelly, marijuana is a dangerous gateway drug. Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly Tuesday called marijuana a gateway drug and vowed his agency will uphold federal laws against its possession, a sterner message than he delivered on the topic just last week. Quote, "Let me be clear about marijuana. It's a potentially dangerous gateway drug that frequently leads to the use of harder drugs," Kelly said during a speech about his agency's mission at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. Its use and possession is against federal law, and until the law is changed by the United States Congress, we in DHS, along with the rest of the federal government, are sworn to uphold all laws that are on the books. So just like Jeff Sessions, he wants to enforce the laws that are on the books as they are, and of course, marijuana is a Schedule I narcotic, according to the current law, which makes it federally illegal and puts it under certain classifications that it doesn't meet. It says that it actually doesn't meet the criteria for being a Schedule I narcotic, and we'll go through that. But I think most people know, just with common sense, that heroin and marijuana are nowhere near being comparable. So he says he wants to enforce the law. So where did the law come from? This is from Wikipedia. Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. The Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs of 1961 is an international treaty to prohibit production and supply of specific, normally narcotic drugs and of drugs with similar effects except under license for specific purposes, such as medical treatment and research. Earlier treaties only controlled opium, cocoa, and derivatives such as morphine, heroin, and cocaine. The Single Convention, adopted in 1961, consolidated those treaties and broadened their scope to include cannabis and drugs whose effects are similar to those of the drugs specified. The Commission on Narcotic Drugs and the World Health Organization were empowered to add, remove, or transfer drugs among the treaty's 4 schedules of controlled substances. The International Narcotics Control Board was put in charge of administrating controls on drug production, international trade, and dispensation. And the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime was delegated the board's day-to-day work of monitoring the situation in each country and working with national authorities to ensure compliance with the Single Convention. So, in 1961, the United Nations, with others, came up with this broad outline of schedules for different types of drugs, and how high of a risk that they are, and how highly they should be enforced. And they came up with the schedules and everything. And then in 1970, the United States basically adopts that. They change the scheduling a little bit, but for the most part, they adopt the outline that the United Nations and others came up with, a board of different foreign leaders of other nations, and we adopted it in a way that complied with it, and it wasn't Richard Nixon that came up with it, as many people believe. So that's where the law came from. It came from the United Nations, a conglomerate of different foreign leaders, many of whom don't have the best human rights and civil liberties records. So for them to be making laws for us in the United States is a little bit absurd in the first place. But then it actually gets even worse when you look at the definitions of a Schedule 1 narcotic. So this is from Wikipedia again. Controlled Substances Act. CSA is a statute establishing the federal U.S. drug policy under which the manufacture, importation, possession, use, and distribution of certain substances is regulated. It was passed by the 91st United States Congress as Title II of the Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act of 1970 and signed into law by President Richard Nixon. The act also served as the national implementing legislation for the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, which was the policy, the treaty brewed up by the United Nations and others. And they're saying that the Act of 1970 complied with that. And Richard Nixon famously did not like hippies very much, so he definitely wanted to crack down on them. And it goes on. The legislation created 5 schedules with varying qualifications for a substance to be included in each. 2 federal agencies, the Drug Enforcement Administration and the Food and Drug Administration, determine which substances are added or removed from the various schedules, although the statute passed by Congress created the initial listing. Schedule 1 substances are described as those that have the following findings. And remember, this is marijuana as well as heroin. A. The drug or other substance has a high potential for abuse. B. The drug or other substance has no currently accepted medical use in treatment in the United States. And C. There is a lack of accepted safety for use of the drug or other substance under medical supervision. So it's, highly likely to be abused, it's unsafe, and, it's got all these problems that are true for heroin, but are actually completely absurd when you're saying that about marijuana. And time and time again, as more states have legalized, and there's been more and more studies about the medicinal benefits of marijuana, you've seen the federal government time and time again double down. And with this new administration, they're not showing any signs of slowing up. And it goes on. No prescriptions may be written for Schedule 1 substances, and such substances are subject to production quotas which the DEA imposes. Under the DEA's interpretation of the CSA, a drug does not necessarily have to have the same high potential for abuse as heroin, for example, to merit placement in Schedule 1. So right there they admit that, oh, well, it doesn't matter. Marijuana doesn't have to be as bad as heroin. We can still have it be a Schedule 1, pretty much because we want it to be at this point, because it flies in the face of common sense, it flies in the face of public opinion and medical studies as well. It really flies in the face of all of that to have marijuana be a Schedule 1 narcotic, but that doesn't stop the federal government from doubling down time and time again. When it comes to a drug that is currently listed in Schedule 1, if it is undisputed that such a drug has no currently accepted medical use in treatment in the United States and a lack of accepted safety for use under medical supervision, and it is further undisputed that the drug has at least some potential for abuse sufficient to warrant control under the CSA, the drug must remain in Schedule 1. In such circumstances, placement of the drug in Schedules 2 through 5 would conflict with the CSA, since such drugs would not meet the criterion of a, quote, currently accepted medical use in treatment in the United States, and that was the Drug Enforcement Administration in a notice of denial of petition to reschedule marijuana in 2001. And right there, they're basically just doubling down on, the listing of the requirements for a drug to be a Schedule 1 narcotic, saying that it has a high potential for abuse, there's no currently accepted medical treatment, and that it is not safe. All of which are not true when you actually look at the evidence, when you look at studies that have been done. But that just doesn't seem to matter to the federal government, and that was their response to a petition that was attempting to reschedule it. They pretty much just said it's not going to happen. So as long as marijuana is federally illegal, um, we're going to have a federal government that is going to loom over, the heads of different states, and who knows how long it will take till we get to the point where we can actually have it federally legalized. I think that definitely is something that needs to happen. But for marijuana to be illegal in the first place, the constitutionality of it actually comes into question. And what I would reference for that is the prohibition. So when alcohol was made illegal, they actually needed a constitutional amendment to do so, not just a bill passed by Congress, basically. And it begs the question, if alcohol required a amendment to the Constitution, why don't any other drugs, especially marijuana, which is so accepted publicly, so highly accepted publicly, and used by so many people? And I want to give you a little bit of a history on the prohibition from none other than history.com. So this is their section on the prohibition, or a piece of it. The ratification of the 18th Amendment to the Constitution, which banned the manufacture, transportation, and sale of intoxicating liquors, ushered in a period in American history known as the Prohibition. The result of a widespread temperance movement during the first decade of the 20th century, prohibition was difficult to enforce, despite the passage of a companion legislation known as the Volstead Act. The increase of the illegal production and sale of liquor, known as bootlegging, the proliferation of speakeasies, illegal drinking spots, and the accompanying rise in gang violence and other crimes led to waning support for the prohibition by the end of the 1920s. In early 1933, Congress adopted a resolution proposing a 21st Amendment to the Constitution that would repeal the 18th. It was ratified by the end of that year, bringing the Prohibition era to a close. So, alcohol, which I think most people can agree is more dangerous than marijuana, required a constitutional amendment. Not just a bill being passed, a constitutional amendment to be made illegal. Then what happened is that created a massive black hole that was filled, a massive vacuum, a black market, and a vacuum that was filled by criminals. And it literally gave rise to organized crime in the United States. And of course caused, bootlegged liquor to be sold to people, which oftentimes was more dangerous, and could potentially kill people in some cases. And of course it gave, there was increased rates of crime and gang violence, and all these problems attributed to the prohibition. So they said, hey, this is a bad idea, and they stopped it. So that was with alcohol. That was with something that is clearly more dangerous than marijuana. So why is it that marijuana can be illegal without having to actually do a constitutional amendment, or any drug for that matter? But I think the case can most strongly be made for marijuana. And then, of course, we've tried this before. And the war on drugs has gone on for decades now. Billions of dollars have been pumped into it. It's incarcerated millions of people. And, it hasn't actually reduced the amount of people that are addicted to drugs and that do wind up using drugs. So it hasn't done anything but cost billions of taxpayer dollars and put, millions of basically non-violent offenders in jail for possession charges. And, of course, that's a strain on taxpayers as well. So, then that's nothing to speak of the black market that's created from having, you know, something be illegal and not regulated. Uh, so there's all these problems, and history shows that prohibition is not the way to go. Yet the war on drugs continues, and now we've got an administration, the Attorney General and others, who are doubling down on rhetoric saying that they're going to enforce the federal law. And as I said, I think anyone can agree rationally that marijuana is safer than alcohol. And alcohol actually is quite dangerous. So I want to read to you from the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. Alcohol use in the United States. Prevalence of drinking. According to the 2015 National Survey on Drug Use and Health, 86.4% of people ages 18 or older reported that they drank alcohol at some point in their lifetime. 71.1% reported they drank in the past year, and 56% reported they drank in the past month. So, of course, a lot of people drink in the United States. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. Prevalence of binge drinking and heavy drinking. In 2015, 26.9% of people aged 18 or older reported that they engaged in binge drinking in the past month. 7% reported they engaged in heavy alcohol use in the past month. So a lot of people also binge drink. And then alcohol-related deaths. An estimated 88,000 people, approximately 62,000 men and 26,000 women, die from alcohol-related causes annually, making alcohol the fourth leading preventable cause of death in the United States. In 2014, alcohol-impaired driving fatalities accounted for 9,967 deaths, 31% of overall driving fatalities. And what you don't see is any deaths from marijuana. I mean, literally, I don't think there's any. There's none. Certainly no one has died from overdosing, because you can't do that. It's impossible. But I don't think anyone has died just from marijuana in any way, really. So you compare that to 88,000 people a year and, 9,967 people drinking and driving and dying because of that. It's nowhere close. It's nowhere close. And that's nothing to say, that's not to say anything of prescription medication, which also takes a huge toll on people, which is also, of course, illegal, and cigarettes, for that matter, which kill, tens of thousands of people a year. So you've got alcohol, which is legal. We tried prohibiting it, figured out that that was a bad idea, that having it legalized and regulated is better. And that's something that's much worse than marijuana on any level. Yet you've still got marijuana labeled as a Schedule I narcotic, right up there with heroin. And one of the main pillars of the argument that keeps marijuana as a Schedule I narcotic is that it has no medicinal value whatsoever. Of course, that has been refuted in study after study after study, but there has recently been another study that is actually a conglomerate of a bunch of studies that just absolutely blows the idea that there's no medicinal value to marijuana out of the water. So this is from Think Progress. Huge scientific study refutes the federal government's stance on marijuana. In the federal drug classification scheme, marijuana is classified at the very top. It is considered to be a Schedule I substance, a category reserved for drugs with a high potential for abuse and no accepted medical use. For years, however, scientists have done study after study showing that this classification is misguided. On Thursday, the National Academy of Sciences put one more nail in the coffin with one of the most thorough reviews of research to date, a massive 396 report on 10,000 research studies in marijuana, assessing therapeutic benefits and risk factors. And this article was a couple months old, I believe, but it is a 365-page report on 10,000 research studies on marijuana. The review, conducted by a panel of experts led by Harvard public health researcher Marie McCormick, is broken into 100 different conclusions, many of which are just assessments of the current state of the research. It is particularly significant, however, that the review states quite clearly that there is, quote, conclusive or substantial evidence that marijuana is effective for the treatment of chronic pain, as a tonic for nausea and vomiting in cancer patients undergoing chemotherapy, and in treating spasticity in multiple sclerosis patients. Quote, given that our federal government still considers it Schedule 1, which means there are no accepted medical benefits, this is a pretty clear refutation of that. Taylor West, the deputy director of the National Cannabis and Industry Association, told Think Progress. So there you have it, this massive report of 10,000 different studies that have, again, time and time again, showed that marijuana indeed does have medicinal value, not to mention that it is nowhere near the level, it doesn't have the risk of abuse, and it doesn't have the level of risk factor in general, not even close, not even comparable as something like heroin. Yet it's put in the same schedule as it. And so you've got this administration that is, we haven't heard Trump come out and really say something definitive on this recently. I'm hoping he'll come out and say that he's going to do what he can to have his administration be relaxed on the federal law and hopefully push towards changing the law. But the rhetoric that we're getting from Jeff Sessions and Secretary Kelly and others in his administration is not pointing that direction. But we're definitely having a lot of pushback. And some of the pushback we're getting is actually from some of the governors of the states that have legalized marijuana. So this is from Business Insider. A group of governors wrote a letter urging Jeff Sessions to keep marijuana legal. The governors of Colorado, Washington, Oregon, and Alaska wrote a letter to Attorney General Jeff Sessions and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin urging the federal government to keep marijuana legal. Quote, as governors, we have committed to implementing the will of our citizens and have worked cooperatively with our legislators to establish robust regulatory structures that prioritize public health and public safety, reduce inequitable incarceration, and expand our economies, the governors wrote. The heart of the issue is the 2013 Obama administration directive known as the Cole Memorandum, which stipulates that the Justice Department place, quote, low priority on enforcing marijuana laws against businesses and organizations that comply with state law. Sessions has indicated a willingness to rewrite the Cole Memo in order to direct the Justice Department to crack down on marijuana businesses that comply with state laws but are still illegal at the federal level. The Justice Department contacted Colorado officials in March regarding marijuana cases. International Business Times reported, saying they hope it will lead to positive changes, quote unquote, for the new administration. Quote, as part of the states have legalized marijuana in some form, we ask the Trump administration to engage with us before embarking on any changes to regulatory and enforcement systems, the governors wrote. So, you know, there you got it. You got pushback from the governors, and you've got this memo that is saying that the federal government's not really going to crack down on states that have legalized it. And Jeff Sessions is saying that, you know, he's coming out and saying that he wants to rewrite that, which would be different than what President Trump has said. Because, again, President Trump has come out when asked about this and said that he sees it as a states' rights issue. But it seems like Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who does not, who is the top guy at the Department of Justice. So if he really pushes towards a crackdown on states that have legalized marijuana, there's a good chance that it's going to happen. And then, of course, you've got other people like Secretary Kelly, again, who are doubling down on that kind of rhetoric. And hopefully President Trump will come out and hopefully he will see the benefits of legalizing marijuana. Because right now, this administration, President Trump does not have the greatest approval ratings. And this is something that the majority of Americans agree on, marijuana legalization. So right now, a crackdown on legal marijuana or marijuana in general would be a very unpopular move politically. On top of that, there are serious benefits, not only for medical patients who use medicinal marijuana, not only in terms of getting rid of the black market, but financially. And I think that is the kind of thing that could get Trump's attention for sure, because there is a lot of money to be made, and there's a lot of money to be saved from from marijuana legalization. So this article is from Fortune.com. Colorado topped $1 billion in legal marijuana sales in 2016. It only took Colorado 10 months to pass $1 billion in legal cannabis sales in 2016, 1 year after the state came up just shy of the milestone revenue figure. Marijuana businesses in Colorado, which voted to legalize the drug recreationally in 2012, reported roughly $1.1 billion in legal sales of medical and recreational marijuana and related products this year through the month of October, according to the latest batch of tax data from the state's Department of Revenue. That number easily tops the roughly $996 million in total marijuana revenue the state reported in 2015. So there you have it. $1 billion made in Colorado in the last year off taxes on legal marijuana. So I think that's something that Trump would look at and be like, maybe we should look into this legalization thing, especially when we have a $20 trillion fiscal operating debt and the, something like $200 trillion in unfunded liabilities that no one seems to want to talk about. So yeah, I think making a little bit of extra money off the ultimate cash crop might be a good idea. And then from the Washington Examiner. So there's an example of it making money. Here's an example of it saving money. Medical marijuana could save $1 billion for Medicaid, study shows. Medical marijuana prescriptions could have saved Medicaid $1 billion on prescription drug costs if it were legal nationwide, according to a new study. The study, published in the Journal of Health Affairs Tuesday, was intended to examine whether patients are substituting medical marijuana for prescription drugs and looked at all Medicaid prescriptions from 2007 to 2014 in states with medical marijuana laws. Researchers found that total Medicaid savings associated with the laws ranged from $260.8 million in 2007 to $475.8 million in 2014. Overall, Medicaid spent just under $23.9 billion for prescription drugs in 2014, meaning medical marijuana saved about 2% of costs. Researchers estimate that if all 50 states adopted medical marijuana, Medicaid would have saved $1 billion in prescription drug spending in 2014. So those are the kind of numbers that I hope Trump will see, I hope he'll look at, and I hope he'll take that into account. I hope he'll also take into account the fact that it is going to be an extremely unpopular move for his administration to really crack down on marijuana legalization and marijuana in general. So I hope he'll really look at all the evidence that's out there. I hope he'll make his own decision, as he is prone to do. And hopefully we can get a little bit of a change in rhetoric from some of the people in his administration. And, the bottom line is that most Americans want marijuana to be legalized, and the vast majority of Americans think that it should be made available to people medically, and that states that have already legalized it should be left alone. And with all that taken into account, hopefully Trump will decide that it is a very bad move to go for really go hard on enforcement of marijuana legalization. So hopefully that's not going to be a situation that we fall into where we got a president really cracking down on that, because that's one thing that the Obama administration, you know, was sort of relaxed on in a lot of ways. Definitely the rhetoric that we've got from this new administration is on another level. So with that, you know, I hope you had a good 420 if you're, you know, into that kind of thing. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe and leave a comment if you've got something to say. I'd like to hear from you. Also, if you'd like to hear the audio version of this, I'll have that on SoundCloud. Also, you can follow me on Twitter or Facebook, and I'll have the links for all that in the description. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and may the force be with you.